Not a dramatic throw, no rearing up, no wild eyes, no cinematic slow motion. Just a quick sidestep on loose shale, and I was on the ground before I even knew I'd left the saddle. Dusty, my old roan gelding, trotted about 20 feet and stopped, looking back at me with that particular expression horses get when they've done something wrong and know it, and don't care. I sat up, my left side ached, my pride ached worse. I was 3 days out from the Harlan Ranch, which was where I was headed, and I was in the middle of a canyon stretch that most sane people avoided after October. The walls were red sandstone, layered like old bread, and the creek that ran through the floor of it was still running despite the cold snap we'd had. Water was the reason I'd taken this route at all. The Harlan land was dry, and the creek was a shortcut that also filled my canteens. I stood up, dusted myself off, started walking toward Dusty. That's when I heard it, a splash. Not a fish splash, not a rock falling in, a human splash, the kind with a little caught breath behind it. I stopped. There was a bend in the creek about 40 yards south, where the canyon wall curved and some cottonwoods grew close together, dropping their pale leaves into the water. The sound had come from there. I'm not a man who goes looking for trouble. I've been a range hand most of my adult life, and range hands learn fast that curiosity is the second most dangerous thing in the West, right after overconfidence. You hear something that isn't your business, you let it be. I walked toward Dusty, but Dusty was between me and the bend in the creek, and as I got close to him and reached for his reins, I happened to glance up. There was a woman standing in the water. She had her back to me. Her hair was dark, almost black, and it was wet, flat against her shoulders, and she was bathing in the creek in October. The steam was rising faintly off the water because the morning sun had barely touched it yet. And she had a cloth in her hand, and she was washing, completely unaware that I was standing there 30 feet away with my mouth apparently open. I turned my back immediately, grabbed Dusty's reins, cleared my throat louder than I needed to warn her. The silence that followed was the loudest silence I'd heard in a long time. Then, "Don't move." Her voice was level, controlled. The voice of someone who was embarrassed, but not going to show it. "Ma'am, I apologize, I didn't know. I said don't move. I heard water moving, the sound of cloth." A pause. "You can turn around." I turned. She was standing on the bank now, dressed, or mostly dressed, a loose linen shirt, dark riding trousers, boots not yet on, her wet hair pushed back from a face that was angular and sun-dark, and currently wearing an expression I couldn't quite name. Something between cold fury and something else. Something calculating. She was carrying a knife, not pointed at me, just held. At her side, the way a person carries a knife when they don't need it yet but might. I raised one hand, kept hold of Dusty's reins with the other. "I'm sorry, I fell off my horse. I heard the water. I didn't see you until..." I turned away as soon as I did. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "According to tribal law, you must marry me now, because you saw me like this." I stared at her. She stared back. I couldn't tell if she was serious. Her face was perfectly, terribly still, the kind of still that could mean anything. I started. "Nakoa," she said. "My grandmother's people. The law is old, but it is law." She tilted her head slightly. "You look frightened. I look surprised. Same thing, usually." But the corner of her mouth moved. Just barely. "I'm not serious." I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. "I know," I said, and I didn't know. I had absolutely no idea. She bent down and picked up her boots, started pulling them on with practiced efficiency. "You fell off your horse." He sidestepped. "Same thing, usually," she said again, and this time it was definitely almost a smile. Her name was Sarah Coldwater. She told me that about 10 minutes later, when we were both standing on the bank and I'd introduced myself. Cole McCready, out of nowhere in particular, headed to the Harlan Ranch to take a winter hand job. And she'd looked at the Harlan name the same way people look at the name of a place that has complicated history attached to it. She was a horse trader, independent. She had 3 horses in a small canyon camp less than a mile from where we stood, and she was on her way to 3 Pines, which was a town I knew of but had never been to, about 4 days' ride northwest. "You're going alone?" I asked. "I've been going alone for 6 years," she said. Which answered that. She let me ride alongside her to get my bearings, she said, just until the canyon opened up and I could find the Harlan Road again. That was the arrangement. That was the very clear, no ambiguity arrangement. We rode for 2 hours before either of us said much. I want to tell you it was comfortable silence, but it wasn't, not at first. It was the silence of two strangers who had started on strange footing and were both being carefully polite about it. She rode a black mare with a white sock on her left foreleg, a beautiful animal, responsive to the smallest shift in her weight. And she rode the way people ride when riding is as natural as breathing. No visible effort, no performance, just the horse moving under her, like they'd made some private agreement years ago. I've been around horses my whole life, and I still felt clumsy by comparison. The canyon opened up into a wide bowl of land around mid-morning. Dry grass bent sideways in the wind, a few juniper trees twisted into shapes. She slowed. "The Harlan Road is that way," she pointed. "You'll hit it by noon." I looked where she was pointing. Then I looked northwest toward Three Pines. "What's in Three Pines?" I asked. "A buyer, a man named Espinoza who pays honest prices for good horses. And you trust him?" "I trust the money," she said. "Same thing." I laughed before I could help it. She looked at me sideways, not hostile, just assessing, and then looked away again. "You got someone waiting at the Harlan Ranch?" she asked. "No one waiting anywhere for me." "Then you're taking a winter hand job because it's winter," I said. "And I need to be somewhere." She considered that. "Then Espinoza also needs temporary hands sometimes. He has a large operation. If Three Pines is the same distance and you don't have someone waiting, I don't want charity." "I wasn't offering charity," she said, with a flatness that made me feel immediately stupid. "Espinoza's work is work, same as Harlan's. I was mentioning it because you'd earn more there, and the bunkhouse is warmer. I have stayed there. I know." We sat with the wind for a moment. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She looked at me again. That calculating look, the one I'd seen on the riverbank, like she was solving a problem out loud that she hadn't expected to need to solve. "The road between here and Three Pines has 3 bad stretches," she said. "2 I know and 1 I've heard about recently. 3 horses attract attention. 1 rider alone attracts more attention." I understood then. "You're asking me to ride with you," I said. "I'm giving you better employment options," she said. "The rest is your decision." I looked at the Harlan Road. I looked northwest. "I'll need to fill my canteens," I said. She reached into her saddlebag and handed me a full one without a word. We set up camp that first night in a hollow between 2 low ridges, sheltered from the wind. She handled her 3 horses with the same quiet efficiency she handled everything else, checking legs, water, a small measure of grain from a bag she carried, speaking to them in low fragments I couldn't quite hear. Not baby talk. Something more like briefing them on the situation. I built the fire. It was the one thing I offered without asking permission first, and she didn't object. Over the fire, with canned beans and hard bread that she had, and I didn't, we started talking. Cautiously at first, the way you do. She asked about the ranches I'd worked. I asked about the horse trading. She'd grown up between 2 worlds. Her mother's family was Comanche. Her father had been a farrier out of New Mexico. And she'd learned horses from both sides, which she said was more different than most people thought. "Comanche horsemanship is not the same as Anglo horsemanship," she said. "The relationship is different. The starting point is different." She paused. "My father used to say breaking a horse means making it stop being a horse. My mother's families would say that's not horsemanship at all." "What do you say?" I asked. She looked into the fire. "I say a horse that trusts you will do more than a horse that fears you, every time. No contest." She glanced up. "Same is probably true of people." I thought about that for a while. "The law thing," I said finally. "Back at the creek." She raised an eyebrow. Was there any truth in it? A long pause. The fire crackled. "Some laws exist," she said carefully. Old ones. Most of my mother's family doesn't hold to all of them anymore. But she picked at the edge of her bread. My grandmother would have. And your grandmother would have meant a man who saw you bathing had to marry you. My grandmother would have meant a man who saw you in a private moment had to take responsibility for it. Take responsibility for you. In those times, in those circumstances, that meant marriage. She shrugged. It was practical. It was also a way of making men think before they wandered into places that weren't their business. It worked, I said. I was very alarmed. This time she actually laughed. A short laugh, surprised out of her. She caught it quick, pressed her lips together, but I'd heard it, and it changed something between us in the way that a first real laugh always does, like a door opening a crack. Go to sleep, Cole McCready, she said. I take first watch. You don't have to. The bad stretch I know starts early tomorrow, she said. You'll want your rest. I've done this before. I laid down on my bedroll and looked up at the stars and thought about a woman bathing in an October creek and the straight-faced delivery of an old tribal law and the way a laugh sounds when someone tries to keep it in and can't quite manage it. I was asleep in minutes. She hadn't been wrong about the bad stretch. It was a long, narrow piece of land between two ranch properties. I never got the full story, but it felt like disputed territory or abandoned territory, which is often worse. The fences had been cut and restrung, so many times they were more rust than wire. There were the remnants of 2 or 3 structures, burned and collapsed, nothing left but outlines in the ground. And there were 3 men sitting on horseback, at the far end of the passage. Sarah saw them about 2 seconds after I did. I knew, because her hand moved to her saddlebag with the casual naturalness of someone reaching for something they've reached for before. Keep riding, she said quiet. Don't change your pace. Don't look at them directly. I see them. Don't look at them, she repeated. We rode. The 3 horses she was leading, a bay, a gray, and a paint that kept tossing his head, moved with her mare in a way that suggested they trusted her calm. I kept my eyes on the horizon and tried to breathe like a man who had nothing worth taking. The 3 riders started moving when we were about 100 yards out. They spread apart slightly, the way people do when they want to create an obstacle. I know the one on the left, Sarah said, still quiet. His name is Cal Pruitt. He's not stupid, which is the problem. Stupid men can be scared off. Cal has to be convinced. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out not the knife I'd seen yesterday, but a folded piece of paper. When we stop, because we will stop, let me speak first. You are my cousin. We are taking these horses to my uncle's ranch in 3 Pines. If he asks the uncle's name, it's Espinosa. He doesn't know the area well enough to question it. That's a detailed story. I've had time to think. We stopped, because we had to stop, because Cal Pruitt and his 2 companions had arranged themselves across the only path. Cal Pruitt was maybe 40, weathered, a red beard going to gray. He looked at the horses the way a buyer looks, not the way a thief looks, which might have been more frightening because it suggested he was at least partially legitimate. Semi-legitimate men in contested territory are harder to predict. Afternoon, he said. Afternoon, Sarah said. Nice string. Thank you. My cousin's doing, mostly. She glanced at me with a look that I interpreted as play along. He has a good eye. I nodded. Tried to look like a man with a good eye for horses and no particular reason to be nervous. Cal looked at me. Looked at the horses again. Where you headed? 3 Pines, Sarah said. My uncle runs the Espinosa operation. Something moved across Cal Pruitt's face. Not recognition, exactly. More like a recalibration. The Espinosa name was clearly not nothing in these parts. Long ride, he said. 3 days, maybe 4. She unfolded the paper slightly. I could see now it was some kind of bill of sale and refolded it. The gesture was enough. It said, I have documentation. I have a destination. I am not carrying anything that is free for the taking. Cal Pruitt looked at his companions. One of them shrugged. The universal language of this isn't worth it. Safe travels, Cal said, and moved his horse aside. We rode through. We didn't speak for a full 10 minutes. When we were well clear, on higher ground with a long sight line behind us, Sarah finally let out a slow breath through her nose. "The bill of sale," I said. "Was it real?" "Real bill of sale for the gray," she said. "The other two are mine by birth. You just kept unfolding and refolding it." "A seen document is a known document," she said. "An unfolded one asks more questions." I shook my head. "You've been doing this a long time." "I have." She looked ahead. "My father was afraid I'd get hurt doing this alone. He wanted me to take a partner, take a husband, someone to share the risk with." A pause. "He died before he could see that the risk is actually easier alone," she said. "Fewer people to protect." I heard what she wasn't saying. "Or fewer people to lose," I said. She didn't answer that, but she didn't deny it either. On the second night, the gray horse went lame. Not badly, a stone bruise, we thought, or the beginning of one. Sarah found it doing her evening check, running her hands down his legs with that focused quiet she had, and she made a soft sound that wasn't quite a word. I came and crouched beside her. Bad? Not yet. Could get bad. She kept her hand on the leg, pressing gently at different points. "He needs a day. Maybe two. That puts us behind." She sat back on her heels. "Espinoza expects me on the 7th. Today is the 4th. She was doing the math. I could see it in the stillness of her face. "I could ride ahead," I said. "Send word to Espinoza." She looked at me. "You don't need to do that," she said. "I know I don't need to. I'm offering." She looked back at the horse. "You don't know the area well enough to navigate alone. I got through the canyon. You fell off your horse in the canyon." "And then I found excellent company," I said. She was quiet for a moment. "I don't ask for help," she said. It wasn't defensive. It was just a fact, stated plainly, the way she stated most things. "I've noticed. It isn't pride exactly." She stood up. "It's that help comes with obligations usually. Attached strings. I learned early that a woman alone in this kind of work either has clean transactions or complicated ones." She turned and looked at me directly, something she did rarely, and when she did, it had a quality of real weight to it. "I don't know yet what kind of transaction this is." I stood up too. "It isn't a transaction," I said. "I fell off my horse, and you made me laugh. And we've been riding the same direction for 2 days. That's all it is." She held my gaze for a moment. Then, "I'll take first watch again. I'll stay up with you," I said, "in case the leg gets worse." She thought about objecting. I could see it. Then she let it go. We sat beside the small fire, the gray horse resting nearby, and we talked differently that second night. Less carefully. The wall that had been there. The one made of practical information, route distances, horse medicine, water sources, got lower without either of us deciding to lower it. She told me about her mother, how she died when Sarah was 13. A hard winter and a harder sickness, and how after that Sarah had lived with her grandmother for 2 years, the grandmother who held the old laws, who braided Sarah's hair in the mornings and told her stories in Comanche and taught her which plants did what, and never once let her feel that she was half of anything instead of whole. She died too, Sarah said, when I was 15, and then I went back to my father, and then my father. She stopped. "When?" I asked. 2 years ago. 2 years was recent. 2 years was still fresh in the way that some grief stays fresh, regardless of how much time passes. "I'm sorry," I said. "He would have liked these horses," she said. "Especially the paint. Ridiculous animal. My father liked horses with personality. What's wrong with the paint?" "Nothing's wrong with him. He has opinions. Strong opinions. About when he wants to eat and which direction is the correct direction." She shook her head. "Espinoza will either love him or send him back. What happens if Espinoza sends him back? Then I keep him." A pause. "I've been keeping him in my head for 2 years anyway." I looked at the paint, who was standing slightly apart from the others, watching us with the alert self-possession of an animal that knows it's being discussed. "His name?" I asked. She looked embarrassed for the first time since I'd met her. "Just barely. I haven't named him." "Because then you'd definitely keep him." "Don't push it, Cole McCready." But she was almost smiling. The second time, I'd gotten close to that smile. I thought that a man could build a whole life around trying to earn the third time. And then I thought, there it is. There's the thing I've been not thinking since a creek in a canyon 3 days ago. The gray horse was sound by morning. Not 100%, but sound enough, and Sarah was satisfied with sound enough. We rode easier that third day, a pace that protected the leg, and the land opened up gradually into something more welcoming. More grass, more color in the distance. The suggestion of a town in the way the road grew more certain. We talked almost the whole day. I don't know how else to say it. We just talked. About everything and nothing, the way you do when you've stopped performing for each other and started just being people who happen to be riding in the same direction. She asked me about my family. Sparse, scattered, a sister in Kansas I wrote letters to but hadn't seen in 4 years. I asked her what she'd do after Three Pines. South, she said. There's a breeding operation in the territory that I've been in contact with. Good bloodlines. If the deal works out, she paused. What? If it works out, I might stop traveling so much. She said it carefully, like she was testing the words. I've been thinking about a fixed location. A small one. A place to come back to. That's a change. I'm 31, she said. Things change. We rode a while. Where in the territory? I asked. She looked at me sideways. Why? She asked. Curious. You're curious about a lot of things. You're interesting, I said simply. She didn't deflect that. She just looked forward, and after a moment, her posture changed, something going quieter and more inward, and she said, West of the Cimarron. There's a valley there. I saw it once when I was young, riding with my father. I've thought about it since. Good water? Excellent water. Creek runs year-round. She glanced at me, and there was something in it, a small private thing. I like creeks, she said. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. She pressed her lips together hard, and then gave up and laughed too. And this time she didn't catch it and pull it back. It came out whole, a real laugh, warm and surprised, and better than anything I'd heard in longer than I could remember. The paint horse threw his head at the sound of it, startled, then settled. See? Sarah said, wiping her eye. Opinions. Three Pines was smaller than I'd expected, and more alive than the road had suggested. A good main street, a working livery, a hotel that had seen better days but was upright and functional. A general store with a real glass window. Espinosa's operation was at the north end. A well-maintained set of corrals, and a barn that spoke of genuine investment. Espinosa himself was a compact man of about 50, with a gray mustache and the handshake of someone who has closed 10,000 deals. He knew Sarah. Not just professionally, he knew her, asked after her, used her name the way you use a name when you're glad to see someone. He looked at the horses. He looked at the gray leg, which Sarah explained without embellishment. He looked at the paint for a long moment. This one, he said. He has opinions, Sarah said. Good, said Espinosa. So does my best mare. I've been waiting for the right match. The gray went for fair price, acknowledged for the leg. The bay went for a better one. The paint went for the best price of all. And when the deal was done, Espinosa insisted we stay for supper, and we did. And over a table that held more food than I'd seen in weeks. He told Sarah about a property west of the Cimarron he'd heard might be coming available. She went very still. The valley? If that's the one you mean, yes. She didn't look at me. But her hand, resting on the table, moved slightly. Just the fingers. Like she was stopping herself from doing something. After supper, Espinosa found me near the corral, alone. You ride with her from the canyon? He asked. 3 days. She doesn't usually ride with anyone, he said. I know. He looked at me for a long moment. She is, he searched. She carries herself alone, because alone is what she's had. You understand me? Yes, I said. Good, he said, and went back inside. She found me later, outside the hotel. The night had gone cold and clear, and the stars over Three Pines were the stars of high country, dense and white. She had her coat on and her hair down, and she looked at me with the expression I'd first seen on a creek bank. Calculating, solving a problem she hadn't expected. Espinosa says he can introduce me to the man who holds the valley land, she said. I know. I was at supper. He also says it's more land than one person can manage efficiently. I know. I'm not. She started and stopped. Tried again. I've been alone by choice. I want that understood. Understood. And I'm not. I'm not asking anything. I know. She looked at me with something that might have been frustration, might have been the effort of saying a thing she didn't have practice saying. But if a person were to, she said. Yes, I said. She stopped. I didn't finish, she said. You didn't need to. She looked up at the stars. I looked at her looking at them. The line of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. The particular way she held herself that I had learned in 3 days, the way you learn a language when you're paying attention. I have a rule, she said. Tell me your rule. I don't make decisions fast. That seems wise. But, she paused. I've been thinking about the valley for years. And when Espinosa mentioned it tonight, the first thing I thought, she stopped again. What? I asked, quiet. The first thing I thought, she said, was that the creek would run in October. The night sat around us, cold and full of stars. That's a lot to build on, I said, just as quiet. Most of the best things are. She turned and looked at me, really looked, the full weight of it, and didn't look away. I move slowly, she said. I want to say that. I have nowhere to be, I said. I made that clear when I took this route. Her breath came out in a small cloud in the cold air. I'm not going to tell you what to do, she said. You never have, I said. You've only offered better options. And there it was, the third time. The real smile. Not almost, not nearly. The whole thing, warm and complicated, and worth every mile I'd ridden to see it. She looked away first, but she was still smiling when she did. The creek does run in October. That's the first thing I want to say. It runs cold and clear, and it runs year-round, just like she remembered. And in the mornings, the steam comes off it, the same way it came off the canyon creek where I first saw her. She never lets me forget that. The valley is smaller than I'd imagined and bigger than I'd hoped. 50 acres of it. Good grass. 1 solid structure when we came, and 3 now, because 2 winters and a good season will do that if you're willing to work. We have 8 horses. The paint is one of them. He still has opinions. She makes decisions slowly. She meant that. There were months when I wasn't sure what we were to each other, and I learned to be patient in a way I don't think I knew how to be before. Not passive. She would have hated passive, would have told me so directly, but patient in the way of a man who has chosen a direction and is willing to walk toward it without running. We were married in the spring, not because of any law, because she decided. She wore her hair down. Her grandmother would have braided it, she told me. Some mourning ceremony, some acknowledgement of the day. And she showed me how it was done. And I did it myself, badly, twice, and the third time she let me do it and didn't fix it after. I think about that creek sometimes. The canyon, the cold water and the steam, and the sound of someone trying to be still and small when they'd been caught somewhere private. And then the straight face, the absolutely straight face. According to tribal law, you must marry me now, because you saw me like this. I'd walked away that morning from a job at the Harlan Ranch, walked toward 3 Pines with a woman who didn't ask for help and didn't need it and took it anyway, on her own terms, slowly, the way she did everything, the way the best things get built.